Good day, students. So we are now in chapter 9, lesson 1, and the lesson is all about the nervous system. For your reference, you must have your interactive science textbook pages 326 to 337. This is a life science subject. I'm Mr. Jasper Policiano, and this lesson is for grade 7 students. What are the objectives of the lesson? To enumerate the role of the nervous system, to differentiate the division of the nervous system, to identify the parts and function of the nervous system, and to discuss on how these senses work. Let's start. What is the role of nervous system? You can use the internet to chat with a friend hundreds of miles away. You can also use it to gather information from anywhere in the world. Like the internet, your nervous system is a communication network. It includes the brain, the spinal cord, and the nerves that runs throughout the body. It also includes the eyes, ears, and other sense organ. The first is receiving information. Your nervous system receives information about what is happening both inside and outside of your body. Your nervous system makes you aware of what is happening around you. For example, if you were at the cookout like on the illustration on page 327, figure 1, you would know when the wind was blowing or as a fly is buzzing around your head. Your nervous system also checks condition inside your body such as level glucose in your blood and in your internal body temperature. Responding to information. Any change of signal in the environment that an organism can recognize and react is called a stimulus. For example, a buzzing fly is a stimulus. After your nervous system analyzes a stimulus, it directs a response. A response is a reaction to a stimulus. Some nervous system responses, such as swatting a fly, or voluntary or under your control. But heart rate, breathing, sweating, and other necessary processes are involuntary responses to stimuli inside your body. The third is maintaining homeostasis. The nervous system helps maintaining homeostasis by directing your body to respond properly to the information it receives. For example, when your blood's level drops, your nervous system signals that you are hungry, so you eat. This action maintains homeostasis by supplying your body with needed nutrients and energy. How do the parts of your nervous system work? Your nervous system includes your brain, your spinal cord, and the nerves that connect organs to all parts of your body. Individual cells that information through your nervous system are called neurons. Neurons, it carry nerve impulses throughout the body. The message or messages that a neuron carries, it's called a nerve impulse. These impulses may occur as either electrical or a chemical signal. A neuron has a large cell body that contains a nucleus, a thread-like extension called dendrites and axon. Nerve impulses begin in the dendrites and move through the neuron's body to tips of the axon. And the axon and their tissue covering make up nerve fibers, and the nerve fibers are arranged in a parallel bundles covered with a more connective tissue. They look like uncooked spaghetti wrapped in this plastic. A bundle of nerve fibers is called nerve. And there are three kinds of neurons. First is sensory neuron. Sensory neuron picks up a stimulus and convert it into a nerve impulse. The second is interneuron. It carries a nerve impulse to another interneuron or to a motor neuron. And the third is motor neuron. It sends an impulse to a muscle or glands, enabling it to response. If you will see on the screen, these are the part of the sensory neuron, which is particularly on the skin, detects the information outside of the body. And the motor neuron is the one that is responsible for transmitting it, the information that being absorbed from outside the body, and it will be transferred to the interneural way, which it will able to transfer to brain, can be in spinal cord, and other parts of the body. And of course, moving impulses between neurons, in every day, billion of nerve impulses travel through your nervous system from neurons to other neurons. That's why you are able to respond on the situation outside of your body. The place where a neuron transfers an impulse to another is called the synapse. When we say synapse, it is a specialized junction when transmission of information takes place between a nerve fiber and another nerve, muscles, or gland cells. The term introduced to the end of the 19th century by the British neurosociologist Charles Sherrington. At the axon tips, if you will take on page 330 or figure 3, at the axon tip, electrical signal carried through the neuron change into a chemical form. This change allows the message to cross the gap. The message then continues in the electrical form through the axon, or neuron I mean. These changes are like answering a phone and then writing down the information you heard. The change from hearing information to writing, it is like the change of electrical to a chemical form. There are two divisions of the nervous system. We have what we call the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. The two main components, we have the central nervous system that includes the brain and the spinal cord. And the peripheral nervous system includes the outside of the central nervous system, which is the nerves. Let's take the central nervous system. The central nervous system consists of the brain and spinal cord. The function, it receives input from the sensory neuron. It directs activity to a motor neurons and association neurons, maintain homeostasis in the internal environment. Central nervous system is like a traffic cop, which is directing a car drivers through a busy intersection. Your nervous system directs your movement. It has two divisions that are working together, which is the central and the peripheral. The brain is the control of the central nervous system. The spinal cord is a thick column of a nervous tissue that links the brain to the peripheral nervous system. Most impulses from the peripheral nerves travel to the spinal cord to get the to the brain. The brain then directs our responses, which usually travels through the spinal cord and back to the peripheral nerves. Going back to the central nervous system, let's focus on the brain. Your brain has about 100 billion neurons, all of which are interneurons. Each of those neurons may receive up 10,000 messages from other neurons and may send messages to about 1,000 more. The three layers of connective tissue under the skull cover the brain. And the spinal cord, it is a brainstem connects to the spinal cord. Run your fingers down to the center of your back to feel the bones on the vertebral column. The vertebral column surrounds and protects your spinal cord. Like the brain, layers of connective tissue cover the spinal cord. Also, like the brain, fluid protects the spinal cord. The illustration is page 332 on figure 5. Let's move on to the peripheral nervous system. This is the second division of the nervous system. The peripheral nervous system is a network of nerves that branches out from the central nervous system, and it connects to the rest of the body. The peripheral nervous system is involved in both involuntary and voluntary actions. That's why, on this case of this, the peripheral nervous system has 23 pairs of nerves. 12 pairs begin with the brain, and the other 31 pairs, the spinal nerves, begins with the spinal cord. One nerve in each pair goes to the left side of the body, and other goes to the right. Each spinal nerve contains axon of both sensory and motor neuron. Each spinal nerve contains neurons. The sensory neurons carries impulses from the body of the central nervous system. In contrast, the motor neuron carry impulses from the central nervous system to the body. We have what we call here, if you will see on the screen, we have the sensory division and the motor division. Under the sensory division, it is classified into two, the somatic sensory and visceral sensory. When under the somatic sensory, we have the sense of touch, the pain, pressure, vibration, temperature of the body wall, and the limbs. In the visceral sensory, we have the stretch, the pain, temperature, the chemical changes in the body, the irritation, the nausea, and the hunger, which is the taste and smell. For the motor, with motor division, it is classified the same thing with the somatic nervous system and autonomic nervous system. When we say somatic nervous system, it is a motor innervation of all skeletal muscles. And autonomic nervous system, it is a motor innervation of smooth muscles, the cardiac, and the glands. Subdivision of the nervous system. The nervous system, again, just to sum it up somehow, this nervous system classified into two, the central nervous system, the peripheral. The central nervous system includes the brain and the spinal cord. The peripheral nervous system, nerves to and from the CNS. Okay, so under the peripheral nervous system, it is classified into two, the somatic and the autonomic. When we say somatic, it is a sense of touch, hearing, or the other muscles that can move. And autonomic, the internal senses, okay? And most especially, it focuses on the sense of a smooth muscle, okay? The sympathetic and parasympathetic, that will be for higher biology. Okay, so reflexes action. The brain usually controls the contraction of the skeletal muscle. Sometimes, however, skeletal muscles contract without involving the brain, and that is what we call reflex. It is an automatic response that occurs rapidly without conscious control. For example, when your finger touches a sharp object, sensory neurons detect a pain stimulus. They send impulses to the spinal cord, and the interneuron pass those impulses directly to the motor neuron. And the motor neuron causes your arm's muscle to contract, pulling your fingers away from the sharp object like the cactus, okay? As the reflex action happens, other nerve impulses travel to the brain. As your brain interprets them, you feel a pain in your finger. It takes longer for the pain impulses to reach the brain and to be interpreted than it does to the reflex action to a car. By the time you feel the pain, you have already jerked your hand away. And in reflex action, it is automatic involuntary motor response. It R consists of apparent part, the receptor, and the apparent neuron. What do your senses do? Your eyes, ears, nose, mouth, and skin are specialized sense organs that enable us to get information from the outside world. Each organ contains sensory neurons that send impulses to the brain, and your brain interprets them which enable us to understand more about the environment. Each of these organs contains a different information that gets from outside of the environment. How you see? You wouldn't be able to enjoy the visual experience of a movie without your sense of sight. Your eyes respond to stimulus of light. They convert the stimulus into impulses that your brain interprets, enabling you to see. For the summary of the lesson, For the summary of the lesson, the central nervous system includes the spinal cord. It is a column of nerves between the brain and the peripheral nervous system. For the brain stem, it connects the brain to the spinal cord, and the brain divided in three parts: the hindbrain, the midbrain, and the peripheral. But it's not somehow mentioned on your textbook, so disregard on this. But this is part of the central nervous system. On the other side of we have the peripheral nervous system. It is classified into two: the autonomic nervous system and the somatic nervous system. And autonomic, it regulates the involuntary bodily process, includes the heart rate, the respiration, the digestion, and pupil contraction, and other automatically without conscious direction. And the somatic nervous system, it carries in sensory information from the sensory organ to the central nervous system and relies motor commands to muscles control voluntary movements. And always remember that you have to answer your Schoology evaluation and Pearson assessment. So that will be all for this week. Thank you.